Hey YouTube, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about 5 things that I wish I knew about multicolor printing before I got into multicolor printing, because quite frankly it probably would have saved me some heartache and some time. So I'm going to talk about 5 things, like I just said, and it's kind of some fixes and mitigations for the 5 caveats I have. Most of these are negative, of course, when it comes to doing things like this, but I'm going to try and give you ideas on how to fix them, and if anybody does have any ideas on how to fix them different from mine, post them down in the comments below. I appreciate it, and so does everybody else. So the first thing I'm going to start with here for multicolor printing is purge towers. So purge towers' main purpose is for pressure advance, right? So that way the nozzle can get the correct pressure for the correct flow before moving on to start the next layer of printing after taking a pause to change filaments. One of my biggest reasons for using purge towers is actually not that, because it's already included, right? One of my biggest things is actually to catch burnt filament that accumulates on the nozzle before it gets to your print. And I'll get into the reason for that here in a minute. But purge towers also can cause some pretty major problems for printers, especially if it falls over. So there are ways, obviously, that you can mitigate your purge tower from falling over. One way is to use Bamboo Lab glue stick like I have over here, or glue stick in general. I made a video about things I would have while printing. This is one of them. You can use glue stick to help make sure that this stays down. You can add a brim to it in just about every slicer that offers this, or you can change the size of it to kind of make it to where it's not as vulnerable. Of course, if you're doing a larger, taller print like this one, there's always a chance that you're going to knock it over, because as you go up and the head moves faster, you're going to hit it. But I wish I would have known some things about this before I ever started using them. One of them is you don't have to use them. And that's one thing that people don't realize, is you don't have to use these. I recommend it just because it does catch burnt filament. But you could also say print another model like this and make it a purge tower, so that way you get maybe one version of something all purged up like this, and then you have your multicolor print. Looks better, and then you can paint this one over, and it's kind of a win-win, but at the same time, I don't ever do that just because I don't really like to. I like to have a standalone purge block. And that's really it. The next thing I'm going to talk about is poop. That thing right there, this stuff. And it actually goes along with the purge chute, not just the poop. And I'll get into the purge chute in this section here, but poop is one of the things, or purge is one of the things that everybody knows about in the multicolor printing world. The only problem being is nobody realizes how much of a mess this stuff makes, or nobody ever talks about it. I have little scraps of this everywhere. I mean everywhere. And I do a pretty good job keeping it clean. And when I say everywhere, I literally mean I found it in my socks inside of my sock drawer. I have found it underneath the bed. I found my dogs eating it. I don't even know how they got it. I have found just about a piece of this everywhere in the house. And I don't even know how it gets there. I found it outside because I guess it fell out when I dumped the trash. It gets everywhere. It's very messy. And it can also cause issues with printing in general when you go to level your bed, especially on the P1Ss and the X1Cs. The X1C has kind of a way to mitigate it with AI, but the P1S and P1Ps do not. And what will happen is you will get this filament, and this is going to happen whether you multicolor print or not. It's just more common when you multicolor print, because there's more chances for failure. But every time you do a color change, it produces poop. The poop does not always fall down the purge chute. Sometimes it sticks to the nozzle, which leads to burnt filament, which hopefully is caught by this purge tower. But sometimes this will fall out onto the build plate at the start of a print and cancel out your auto bed leveling. It'll still level, but it will fail because it'll start throwing down first layers that don't stick to anything besides air. So one thing you should watch out for. Another thing is also this: there's a lot of this that gets produced, a lot more than you'd think, and it does produce more waste and all that fun stuff. You can turn it down and you can tune it. I don't do any of that just because there's a lot of calculating involved and a lot of time waste, and I just don't have the time for that. Even though it saves me some filament, it's not worth my time. In order to fix that issue, the only thing I can suggest is doing some wiper nozzle mods on your P1S, or create some sort of system on the back of this printer to help collect the poop. I'm working on one on the next build for my giant table that's going to house all my printers. But until that point, the only thing I've come up with is a box and have someone do something with it to help mitigate purge waste. The next thing I'm going to move on to, which is number 3, is the purge chute itself. So the P1S and the P1P do not have AI features like the X1C does that would lead you to savior, really. And what I mean by that is the purge chute on this can sometimes get backed up if you don't change out the box you have in the back, or just too much of it accumulates in the back because you forget and it starts clogging up the purge chute. What can happen on the P1P and the P1S specifically is you'll get to the point where the printer won't stop because there's nothing to tell it to stop, and it'll end up having a collision inside the purge chute because too much filament is built up, and it'll actually knock off the face of your extruder, and it will also cause steps to skip, which then leads to issues like this right here, which I don't know if you can see from there. This is a layer shift, and that was caused because the purge filament backed up, caused the skip steps, then it started going more, and then it just escalated, and luckily I didn't end up bending my nozzle, which is one thing that can happen. Now obviously the fix for this is to make sure that the purge chute is clean all the time, and make sure if you're doing a long multicolor print, you're not going to be home, that you have somebody or something that can clean that out. Otherwise you run the risk of failing. I've only had it happen when you get to about that 500 to 1,000 plus color changes, but it can happen at any point in time if you're not careful. And the next thing I'm going to cover on this is actually time, how much time it takes. So number 4 for me about multicolor printing is I wish I knew how much more time it took. Printing this little Charmander here in a single color would take me roughly 2 hours, 2.5 hours, I think. Last time I sliced it. To do a multicolor print, it took 17 hours. Which is crazy because you're like, how? If it's that small, this thing's only 2 inches tall. And the reason for that actually isn't for how long it takes to lay down the filament. It's actually how long it takes to heat the nozzle, cool the nozzle, pull filament, push filament, heat the nozzle, cool the nozzle, and then start the next layer. But first, of course, it goes to the purge block. The way to mitigate that with multicolor printing, you can't. Realistically, I mean, you can do some slicer settings to kind of mitigate that and change it. The only thing I've really come up with is actually to do less color changes as possible. Maybe increase layer height. And then if you can hear that knocking over there, that's actually the AMS on top of the system trying to pull some red filament. And it's stuck. And I'll fix that later. But I haven't found a good caveat or a good way to fix the multicolor printing time. The only thing I could think of is to buy a Prusa XL, and I don't know about you, but $4,000 to print something like this isn't quite justified yet, even though the waste would probably save me $3. So I would just need to print 1,000 of them. The very last thing I'm going to talk about, and this is going to be a shorter video, sorry, not sorry, especially with all the Bamboo Lab sales going on, I hope someone sees this and kind of gets an idea if they want to start multicolor printing, because everybody doesn't want to start there, but they end up there. But if you're going to do multicolor printing, you're going to have a lot more wear and tear on your printers, which leads me to reason number 5, or things I wish I knew about printing multicolor. The 5th reason is wear and tear. So obviously, if you have filament being fed from your AMS and it is running through your PTFE tubes, every turn in your PTFE tube, so for every bend you have, you're going to run into a part where the tip of the filament is scratching the inside of this tube, and where you have sharper turns is where you're going to get a blowout. And the blowout is when the filament does not follow the curvature of the PTFE tube, it goes straight out the side. So instead of following curved, it comes straight out the side and just keep feeding endlessly. And trust me, I've had it happen 3, 4, 5, too many times. I'm ashamed to admit how many times it's happened. But it has led to some very messy cleanup. It's not necessarily difficult to clean it up. It's just a major pain when you have to hand spool filament back onto the spool just because it kept going and going and going. Sometimes it'll recognize it and say, hey, no, this is taking too long, and it'll stop. But it'll just pull it back and then start feeding it again, which causes more wear and tear. Another thing about the AMSs in general, when it comes to wear and tear, there's only one motor in the back of this that feeds. It's called your main feed unit. There is little feed units in each one of these, but the main motor on the back also gets through more wear and tear. I currently have a P1S AMS system out of order right now just because of the wear and tear on it. It had roughly 4,000 hours on it before it did that, so I'm not too ashamed. But if you are going to buy an AMS just to do multicolor printing, make sure you buy some extra PTFE tubes, maybe an extra hub motor or hub assembly. I think they sell an AMS reusables kit that I would highly recommend using or purchasing with it. I think they're like 50 bucks or something. They might be on sale now, but it will really help with the wear and tear that you get on the printers. Not to mention the fact that I'd also buy an extra nozzle if you're going to do multicolor printing, just because if you do have problem number 3 here, which is collisions and the purge chute backing up, you're going to bend a nozzle, which could obviously stop you from printing if you don't have an extra one already. These do usually come with an extra nozzle, but it doesn't have the thermistor or the fan attached to it, so you have to go through and do that. So buy some assembled nozzles if you're going to do that. Other than that, all the PTFE tubes I buy are just straight from Bamboo Lab. I don't go anywhere else to get them. I just go straight there because I order so much stuff from Bamboo Lab. It doesn't really make sense to order some off AliExpress or something for 2-week time when I can just get it from them. But with that, I think I'm going to call it, and I hope you guys learned something from this little video. And of course, I still highly recommend multicolor 3D printing. I mean, you can get some amazing models like this. I've done a whole Christmas decoration. They're totally worth it. It's just there's some things you really should watch out for, because it can ruin a 2-day print. That's what this was. So with that, thank you everybody for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Leave me some feedback down in the comments below. I'm just getting back into this, and I gotta say it's a little rough after being away for 8 months, 3 months. I haven't made long form content in a while. But anyways, thanks, peace, thanks for watching.